Hello everyone, and today I'll be talking about the earthquake I experienced in Cebu City in February 2012, just before I was due to return home to Australia. Now that was my sixth visit to the Philippines, and still my last one to date. It's 2019 now. I still haven't been able to get back. I started off in Manila. I then went to Iloilo, and then I went to Bacolod, and I finished up in Cebu, Cebu City. And I was at a motel I'd stayed at before, and it was in downtown Cebu, fairly close to Coron Street, or Colon Street, and yeah, just in the very downtown area. And now earlier that day, the earthquake, we'll get onto that in a minute, but the sort of earlier that morning there'd been people fixing up lights in the corridor just outside my room, so there was a bit of drilling and a bit of noise, and mildly inconvenient, although I'd already woken up by then, so it wasn't a huge problem. But when the actual earthquake hit, which I think was about 10 to 12, there was about 30 seconds of a dull rumbling noise, and it was just a sort of rumbling noise, almost like an aeroplane, and I'll never forget that noise. And I would say it went for about 30 seconds, or it felt like that. It may well have been less than that. Because of that work in the corridor, my initial thought was, oh, they're doing a bit more work out there, so I just ignored it. And then I had a look around my room, and I suddenly realised that the whole room was actually moving. I don't know whether you were young, you ever tried making houses out of bits of paper and sticky taping the walls together and trying to make a house literally out of bits of paper. But we did that when we were kids, and the room was like a little paper house. It was literally shaking from side to side, and it did stop, and by the time it stopped was about the same time I actually realised what was happening. The pictures on the wall in the room were a bit lopsided. There was no visible structural damage at that stage, but I thought I'd just got to get out down to the street as quickly as possible. And I just remember another totally random thing. Just before the earthquake happened, I'd ordered some cream of mushroom soup for lunch, and the guy phoned me back and said, "Sir, we don't have cream of mushroom, we have cream of asparagus." So a totally random thing which I would have forgotten about by now if it hadn't been sort of so closely connected, or the proximity to the earthquake. So yeah, I got downstairs, I walked down the 3 floors. I certainly didn't want to risk going in a lift. There were other people that sort of a little bit confused, not really knowing what was going on, and people were a bit shaken. I was probably a bit shaken. So I got down outside. So I was outside on the street, and with a lot of Filipinos and quite a lot of expats or foreigners who were staying in the hotel. And one guy, I think he was from Sweden, said his TV had got smashed. We were just sort of working out what we were going to do next, because it had all happened very, very suddenly, and it was reported on the news later on that it was a 6.9 strength earthquake, so it was a strong earthquake by definition, and it was about 74 k's from the epicenter, which was somewhere near Dumaguete, somewhere sort of southwest of Cebu City. Now we went past the front desk, and the guy there was just totally unfazed. There was no emotion at all. I just asked him, how safe is it, or when has this happened before? And he said, oh look, we had another one back in 1984 which was pretty bad, but he didn't show any visible signs of being concerned. He was just sitting behind the desk, sort of business as usual. Probably the worst thing, maybe even a little bit worse than the earthquake itself, was there were lots of aftershocks after it, literally thousands of them. You couldn't feel most of those. They were little ones, but I mean some of the aftershocks were as big as another earthquake itself. I remember about 6 o'clock that night there was, or 6:30, there was probably a 4.5 or even a 5 strength aftershock. So the bed was shaking and moving, and it was a pretty nerve-wracking situation, not really knowing when the next aftershock would be and how long it would be for. And sort of similar, a little bit like the turbulence on an aeroplane, but not quite the same, I guess, because you're not sort of in in a transport vehicle like a plane. So yeah, that all sort of happened very quickly, and later on I was in the internet cafe, and there was a bit of a tsunami alert, but I'll talk about that in another recording. I did stay that night, I think I had 2 nights to go, but the following night I had a look outside my window and there was plaster sort of crumbling off the room. It's a pretty old hotel, and I think about 5 o'clock that evening I just decided, oh look, I'm flying from Lapu-Lapu, or from Mactan Island, which is, there's 2 bridges across to there, and I thought I'd probably been pretty paranoid, thinking, oh, if there's an earthquake and the bridge breaks down or something, then I won't get on my plane, or maybe I just wanted to be somewhere different. So I just sort of left them. I'd already paid for that night, but it was only, I think it was 999 pesos, so it wasn't a huge loss. And then I went and stayed in a sort of slightly upper class hotel. Well, it was 58 Australian dollars. It wasn't flash, but it was nice. And again, there was still aftershocks there, sort of 2-3 days after. But the last night when I left, I sort of said goodbye to all the staff, and I sort of thought to myself, oh, I'm a bit of a deserter. I'm leaving all these guys here. They can't go anywhere else. And I sort of felt I'm saying goodbye and leaving them behind. It was a funny sort of feeling. But anyway, that's sort of my experience of an earthquake in the Philippines. I have experienced one which was 4.5, I think, here in Australia, a little one. But a 6.9 earthquake that close to it, it was pretty full on. And as I said, the sound from it is something I'll never ever forget.